What's up, people? Good to see so many familiar faces over here.
Hi, Amit. How are you?
Fabulous, fabulous. Never been better.
Hey, Amit.
Hi, Harsh.
Hi, Amit. Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Hey, everyone.
Okay, who all do we have over here? Let me just go from the beginning. Okay, I can see Kavya, Vishal, Harsh, Ravi, Siddharth, Raghav, Utkarsh, Suhas, Harsh, Ananya, Prashant, Shekhar, Renu, Babu, what's up? Mukesh, Rohit, okay, another Rohit, my colleague, Advait, Harsha, hey Samkit, Ravindra, Puneet, what's up? Asit, hi, hi Yogesh, been a while, man. Then we have Pranshul, hey there, Abhinav, Aditya, Niharika, Riya, Nikendra, Lakshay, Karthikeyan, Rajat, Ankit, Simran, Vardhan, Arvind, Niklesh, Ishita, Fanindra, Sharvari, and Arushi. Welcome everybody, guys. Come on video. So videos are needed only in the beginning, possibly in the conclusion, and we'll also create some breakout rooms where you all could get to know each other a little bit. So during that period, rest of the time you can be off video, but it really just helps if all of us are in video for a short duration in the beginning. So thank you, and thank you all for your curiosity and for joining us together in this Saturday afternoon. Generally, it is chill time, post-lunch sleeping time. I don't know whatever you'll be doing Saturday, but you've kept all that aside and come over here to possibly learn this thing together, and I acknowledge you for that. I know most of you, some of you I don't even know, and so let me just give a quick introduction. My name is Amit. I run a company called Wow Labs. I'm also running a Web3 venture called Socially, which I've been forced into launching a little prematurely because some of the people that we're working with require our web presence to be there. So you would possibly not see enough Wow Labs and some Socially branding in some of the slides that I'm going to be presenting to you. Now, I've been working in Web3 since 2017. In 2017, we created a decentralized storage protocol called Lake Network. And we've built like a series of dApps on Ethereum, EOS, and a bunch of stuff beyond that. More recently, we've been working on on-demand Metaverse protocol with interoperable social tokens. So communities, creators, celebrities, they can all come and create their own cryptocurrency, launch their own metaverse, kind of monetize their crypto in an environment where this crypto is the native currency. Now, during this period that we've been working on Web3, we've seen some massive movements. Now, the crypto bull run of 2017 was very of 2021 was very distinct from the bull run of 2017. There's way more institutional participation, and like things could have gone anyway after 2017, but after the more recent bull run and a lot of institutional support, I think cryptocurrencies are definitely here to stay irrespective of whatever regulations go in majority of the world's countries. And possibly during the course of this entire 6-week saga, we shall cover a lot of things, including the politics of cryptocurrencies when time permits. So now, there isn't there isn't enough time for everybody to introduce themselves. But what we're going to do is create like a breakout room so that you guys can get acquainted with each other in groups of 4 to 6 people each. Harsha, could you open breakout rooms, please?
Sure.
So what we want you to do in the breakout rooms are introduce yourself, what you do, and in as succinct a way as possible. And just leave the breakout room once everybody's introductions are done. Thereafter, I'll just walk you through what's the agenda of today's session, what's the agenda of future sessions, and we'll take it one by one from there. Sounds like a plan?
Absolutely.
Yep. Okay.
100%.
Whenever you're on, you can totally unmute yourself. It's like an open session. You can say yes. Use the thumbs up or the reaction symbols to say. In between, while I'm talking, you can totally use your, you can raise your hand and I'll take your question then and there itself, or you could type something on chat and we'll take it then and there. Alrighty. So I've already introduced myself briefly, but to introduce the companies that I represent, Wow Labs is a company that I founded about 10 years ago. It's a reasonably reputed turnkey product development company. A bunch of Indian funded startups, some unicorns. Their core tech stack was built at Wow Labs. We've consistently been recognized as one of India's top development shops. Like I mentioned, 2017 was our entry into building on blockchain, and there are multiple different chains that we guys have built in. Socially is our a product that we guys have built and launched out from Wow Labs. So the team at Wow Labs is also involved in building socially, and that is something that I'm very actively doing right now. A thing that makes the team over here pretty interesting is that we are hardcore community guys. Between the core team at Wow Labs, we've built startup communities, design communities, tech communities, and product communities. And I think so Web3 is extremely community centric. We will at some point in time discuss why, and let's explore these things together. What we plan to cover over the next 6 weeks are, first the basics. Like when we get started with blockchain, it's very essential to learn about Bitcoin, why it came into being in the first place, how does it work internally, and then go from however the crypto industry has evolved. So the next big evolution after digital money, which was Bitcoin, was smart contracts, essentially programmable money, which became possible via Ethereum. This also triggered a lot of innovation with financial instruments, with all this new found programmability, which came to be known as decentralized finance. And we're going to dig deeper into that. And by the way, all of these things that we're going to cover are reasonably hands-on. So you're going to have something as an assignment, and we'll keep in touch over WhatsApp, etc. And we would, for instance, those of you who are complete newbies, we would totally expect that by the end of this session and before the next session, you guys have already gone ahead and created your wallets, bought some Bitcoin, maybe any other cryptocurrencies also, so on and so forth. So by the time that we get into DeFi, you'll actually be listing with trying out different DeFi products on your own. So keep aside a little bit of money, whatever you can afford to lose, your couple of $1,000, couple of thousand rupees, 10,000, 20,000, whatever works for you. 2,000 is also perfectly fine, but get your hands dirty and start doing stuff. And we're going to provide you the support and guidance if you're stuck anywhere. Then we're going to be working with NFTs, where ideally you would launch a small little NFT of your own as well. Not a collection, but a small little image that you can make as an NFT, put it out there. We'll dive deep into gaming and the entire play-to-earn economy. Then we go ahead and cover social tokens, which are custom cryptocurrencies and DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations. We'll also talk about what we think is the future of blockchains, which is interoperability. So today, blockchains can't talk to each other, and it's kind of a very poor user experience. And this problem is being addressed by a few protocols. We're going to discuss them. And lastly, talk of the town, Metaverse, and what happens beyond. What can we expect the next couple of years, or maybe next 5 years, as an evolution of the decentralized world. So these are the things that we're going to be covering. And let's dive straight into blockchain. So some house rules. So during the conclusion, during the introduction, which is already complete right now, and the breakout rooms, please keep your video on. And yeah, when you're speaking, be in a quiet environment. You can always raise your hands. And in case I don't just, my chat is not something that I'll be able to see over here, but please do feel free to stop whenever I have taken a break and you have a question. please just feel free to shoot out a question then and there itself. We'll try to keep it as interactive as possible. All right, so this is a statement made by Vitalik Buterin. He's the very young, enigmatic founder of Ethereum, quite a geek. And so one of the core problems that a blockchain solves and why it's such a game changer is that it eliminates middlemen. We need our central authorities, not necessarily just middlemen. And these central authorities are generally needed because whenever we are transacting digitally, let's say I want to transfer something to you, or I want to authorize that X needs to be done in an environment where I'm not physically present in front of you, and there's no way for you to verify who I am, etc. We need some other intermediate central party to authorize that particular transaction. About money, it'll become banks. If it is in the case of the example that Vitalik is talking about, between a person riding a taxi and a person who's driving, who's the driver of that taxi, there's this whole platform which will come into play, and these guys would rely on the platform authorizing that yes, the payment has been made, the destination, etc., has been entered, and the trip was actually indeed fulfilled, and all dispute resolution, etc., happens on that platform. So there is, of course, a hell of a lot of utility of having centralized platforms that manage some of these things, because honestly speaking, it is very important that sometimes things need to be reversed, or something that has been proclaimed to have been done but incorrectly done needs to be reversed and set right. And when it and this is generally called the reversibility problem. So when it comes to maybe stuff like exchanges, so I have decided that I have bought, so very recently rather, the price of nickel exploded, and a lot of people lost a lot of money, a lot of people gained a lot of money. And all these trades used to happen in the centralized commodities exchange in London. It so happened that so sorry about that. I'll just let this siren go. It happens at 4:30 every day. Yeah. So it so happened that these exchanges decided to pause trades, which is totally fine. But later on, they said that all the trades that happened for one day will actually be reversed. Now, this is particularly problematic for people who actually made a killing when the price of nickel actually hit very high, but it also provided a lot of relief to people who ended up losing tremendous amounts of money with that sudden kind of jump. In such cases, who really gets to choose, boss, whether I can play around with your money, your transactions or not? These central authorities. So especially when it comes to money, it has been questioned that maybe these centralized parties aren't very efficient, and maybe they aren't. They don't have, our best interest in mind. Has it happened in the past sometime? 1930s, Great Depression, a lot of people lost their money, when the banks, there was a bank run and the banks weren't able to return this money either. So long story short, what blockchains generally are able to do is eliminate a central authority and allow people to transact in a trustless peer-to-peer fashion. We'll talk what trustless means. We'll talk what peer-to-peer means in a bit. We discussed reversibility. We discussed that there's no intermediary or a central authority that is needed. Let's talk about double spend. Now, in the context of money, digital money, it is very tricky if I try to send some money to you. Let's say I sent Harsha some digital money. Now, given that it is digital, unlike a bank rupee note, which is tangible, you can feel it, that it can't be easily duplicated. Harsha can totally create a binary copy. Binary copy means eventually everything on the internet is represented in the form of zeros and ones. These are called binary. And Harsha can totally create an exact identical 0 and 1 binary copy of whatever I transferred to him, right? And what prevents Harsha from doing that? And then Harsha can similarly choose to keep doubling, tripling, doing whatever with that money that I ended up sending to him. And there is no way that this transaction can really, or such transactions are really feasible. So this is what had not been solved until Bitcoin came. And how they ended up solving is something that we're gonna solving this problem called the double spend problem is what we're going to look at today. The other interesting thing about Bitcoin is the way we look at it. So Satoshi Nakamoto, who wrote the Bitcoin white paper, we're going to be discussing a little about this entity as well. Envisioned that Bitcoin will be used as digital cash. So it was a fantastic vision, but we don't see a lot of transactions like day-to-day goods being bought and sold using Bitcoin anymore. What Bitcoin has ended up becoming is like a store of value, which is more or less free from the clutches of governments and other economies of the world. So it acts like gold. So there is a limited supply of, there's a limited supply of gold in the planet, and gold is valuable wherever you are in whatever form. Bitcoin also has ended up representing itself as a store of value. So, so far, this is what we can consider Bitcoin to be as either cash or store of value. But why did Bitcoin emerge as a store of value? What were the real problems with the conventional banking system, or how money was created conventionally itself needs to be explored a little bit. So far, I would just like to take a small pause and ask if there are any questions. None? All right. So money, of course, has evolved over time, and electronic money has had its early pieces being contributed as early as the late 1980s. It was some very cutting edge work by a company called DigiCash, and this innovation has continued happening through the 1990s. But the double spend problem was never truly effectively solved until Satoshi Nakamoto published the Bitcoin white paper in 2009. 2010 January, the first Bitcoin transaction was made. The rest is history. Now, right now, these days, how is money really printed? How is the value of money determined? And is there any risk of ongoingly relying on the current systems in which money is built? Now, these were some of the concerns that the people who created Bitcoin, they were grappling with. And there was a very interesting hidden message that was shared in the very first Bitcoin transaction that was made, which spoke about banks being bailed out after the 2008 recession. And a bailout effectively means that the taxpayers' money will be utilized to be able to rescue a bank that lost a lot of its money in bad debt, right? So how exactly money moves around is something that we'll just look into shortly, because this context is very important in the way that Bitcoin itself has ended up evolving. So in the current world, do we have a slide on it? No. Money is always printed by central banks. Now, these guys, suppose the cost of a 100 rupee note, printing a 100 rupee note is 3 rupees. The remaining 97 rupees is, let's say profit. Now, it's called the seigniorage, And this profit is generally good for the government. It's also good for the taxpayers because effectively they don't have to pay extra in the form of taxes so long as this seigniorage is getting utilized. The problem with not printing unlimited a lot of money ongoingly just to make expenses being met by the seigniorage is that if we let politicians have a free hand in printing unlimited money, very soon there will be too much supply and the value of that currency will go down to zero, or there'll be hyperinflation in place. So there are checks and balances that are kept, so only a limited amount of money is printed. So what happens post this printing? This money in turn is borrowed by the government. It is borrowed by the sale of government bonds. It essentially says that I'm going to pay the central bank. The government is going to pay the central bank a certain amount of interest against taking all of this currency. Then this currency, and by the way, this currency that is getting printed is only just about 3 to 7% of the overall currency. Rest of the currency is created by private banks or other banks that are there in any particular country, and they do it primarily by creating debt. So a debt also for that in that sense ends up being money. So private bank, we put in a deposit over there in private bank. Let's say we deposited 1,000 rupees. Now this bank will keep 10% of it with itself. The remaining 9,000 it will further loan out to somebody else. That person will take that 9,000 and put it as deposit in another bank, possibly, and again 90% of it can be given out, loaned out to others. So the initial deposit of 10,000 rupees actually ends up becoming 19,000 rupees, and as money changes hands, more and more loans keep getting created, the value of this money also keeps getting created. So for those of you from the accounting background, for the lender, it becomes this money, which is the bank, it ends up becoming an asset. This debt that is created. Sorry? Okay. So for the lender, which is the bank, this 9,000 extra that was created, out of thin air, essentially becomes an asset for them on which they end up earning interest. For the borrower, it becomes a liability and they pay an interest, to keep utilizing it. At the time that this entire money is paid back to the bank, of course, the asset and the liabilities get cleared from both the books, but the interest that was paid ends up becoming the profit that the bank has earned. Now, this essentially is called fractional reserve banking. So banks literally have the ability to keep creating debt and showing it as money. And this is how the economic machinery of the world also moves to a great extent. But in 1914, something interesting happened. And earlier, at least, there was this mandate that only about 10%, at least 10% of the money will have to be kept by the bank as a reserve. In 2014, even that limit was removed. So now, effectively, in certain governments, the banks are capable of printing as much money as they want out of thin air. Now, when so much money is getting printed, it definitely has some adverse consequences, right? If there's too much money, but the amount of services and goods that we are producing in an economy, if that is remaining the same, but the amount of money is increasing, then obviously the price of the goods and services should increase, right? Guys, I do not know if I'm with you. So far clear, guys?
Yes, very much, Sheikh.
Yeah.
Yes.
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 Yeah.
I actually have a question.
Sure.
When you say the banks are printing money, you mean they're creating money through debt, right? It's not that they're printing actual physical currency.
Correct statement. Creating money through debt.
Right. Got it.
They are
Thanks.
introducing new money into the economy
Got it.
as debt,
Thanks.
not printing it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
So we are talking about a scenario where the cost of the goods and services in the country ought to be going up, right? And this is what we call inflation. Now, a lot of money has been printed in the last couple of years post-COVID, right? And we don't see the price of like a lot, as in 40% of the money of the world has been printed in just the last 2 years. So from the history of mankind, from the time paper money was introduced in, like 806 AD, till now, there was X amount of money printed. Now there's 40% of that X printed in just the last 2-3 years. So, but we aren't seeing the price of everything jump very significantly. Why is that happening? Primarily because, this inflation is being directly correlated in the stock markets. A lot of this money has actually not gone to the beneficiaries, like people at the bottom of the pyramid, right, where it was meant to go, but it has found its way to other people who want to beat the inflation. So when there's so much of crazy money supply going on, and things are getting inflated, the only thing that smart investors want to do is beat inflation, right? What are the mechanisms that they have for beating inflation? Possibly small stock market or any other kind of highly speculative areas where they can end up investing the capital, so that the rate at which currency is getting debased, they can at least get profits that are higher than that. So despite there being a downturn in the economy, stock markets have really blossomed significantly in the recent past, and that is the reason. Of course, there will be corrections of all this mad money printing also, but chances are that it could just sustain itself. Now, this whole thing about infusing new capital, to bail out banks at the time of a recession and etc., is also called quantitative easing, which possibly was started by Japan. I think everybody took it from there, and Japan is doing reasonably well, for the last 40 years. So chances are that, the recession, depression, whatever should come, might not come very easily or very quickly. But the current monetary system of the world definitely is very, very fragile. Now, at the end of the day, so there was a central bank that was the money issuer, right? And, this is the bank that keeps, so the quantitative easing thing that I spoke about is essentially new money being printed. These are not things that money that is generated by private banks as debt, but this is what the central bank ends up printing new notes and, utilizing that money to rescue banks, etc., at times of these bailouts. So central banks ends up printing more money. Central bank will possibly never run out of money because it can't go bankrupt, because it has the authority to keep printing money. So it will end up, creating a greater debt on the government, right? And the government will put what will you then utilize. There are only two ways in which the government can end up repaying. This repayment happens via inflation or via taxpayers' money. So all of this is basically a liability on the future generations to pay this debt that is getting mounted up. And this debt in all major economies of the world is ridiculously high in today's day and age. So I think 80% of the GDP of Japan right now is money owed to the Japanese central bank. The scenario in USA is very similar. Scenario in China, scenario in India, all of it is very similar. Now, is very similar. So some modern economists say that look, a country doesn't really need to go back to really repay the interest. A country does not really need to repay the principal, but so long as it can keep paying the interest, like if it's making enough earnings from taxes to pay the interest, it can totally indefinitely postpone the economic crisis. But it's a very fragile system, so to speak, right? And let's say in times of war, I'm getting on to a new point also right now. In times of war, like Ukraine, what is the value of the Ukrainian currency when there's so much of uncertainty associated with whether it's going to remain a sovereign country or not? You're trying to cross the border. if you're carrying a lot of Ukrainian currency with you, will somebody value it enough to, take it as a bribe, smuggle you out into another country? Possibly not. But if you have something else other than the Ukrainian dollar, which could be very useful for the person in any other country, especially in the country that um, you're trying to go off to. Like if you had say gold instead of the Ukrainian currency, that person would have readily taken it, right? So this is where Bitcoin also comes in, wherein it is like the digital alternative of gold, right? And where Bitcoin is actually seen as a store of value. So rather long explanation to the point about Bitcoin being a store of value, but I hope it does give some interesting context as to why Bitcoin is important or why is it popular and it's gaining the popularity that it is in the world today.
I had a small question, and it's on the Japan thing that you said. So you said that like if a country is like printing more money through debt, so the way to repay it is either like you could print more money, pay back the debt you already have, or it's something that you're pushing on the future generation, like get it from the taxpayers' money. But if you like, if as you said, I haven't studied much about Japan, but could it be that Japan actually produced assets that could repay the debt that they have created? So for example, when a country takes some debt, like it takes it to develop infrastructure that in future could increase the GDP, and they could justify the debt that they have created.
100%. So the economy will be a sum total of all the goods and services that have been produced in that particular country. And it is totally possible if you're able to bring the production capability up, it could be utilized to repay the debt. And when I say that it's paid by inflation, alongside inflation, it is productive capacity going up. And this is where technological progress ends up playing a very important role, because technology would grow exponentially, possibly creating enough value. But given that even the consumption of whatever gets created ends up happening in the same world that we are living in, these two should cancel each other out.
So yeah, and if in case of Bitcoin, how would this happen? So for example, if I want to create more value than already exists in the system, so like, is there any way this could happen, or Bitcoin's nature won't allow this?
So Bitcoin is 100% programmed, and we're going to go into exactly how it is programmed as well. So this won't be possible with Bitcoin. Okay, so let's. So this is a Nobel economics prize winning economist. Let me just get his name. Oh, and I broke my pencil. Sorry, so I don't know the guy of the name of the smart guy who said this, but this is an economics Nobel winning economist who said that I don't believe we shall ever have good money again before we take a thing out of the hands of the government. All we can do is by some sly roundabout, and this is something that he said in 1994, some sly roundabout, if we can do is by some sly roundabout way, introduce something that they can't stop. Right, and this kinda is where Bitcoin comes into the play. It is not something that can be stopped by governments. And earlier they were trying to ignore, then they were laughing, and now they are like, hey, we'll have to adopt it. Then they try to fight, and now they're saying that we'll have to really go ahead and adopt it. So let's go down into how Bitcoin works, because a lot of what we will be covering next, it'll lay as the foundation of it. So I'll bring my iPad out, and we'll just try to construct together. If we were Satoshi Nakamoto, and if we were coming up with building a digital currency, how will we go about doing it? And in the process, cover possibly some of the evolutionary points of Bitcoin itself. So I'm just logging in again from iPad. Could I get a screen share access, please? Okay, as Murphy would have it, I think I broke my Apple Pencil just right now. So I'm just seeing by any chance if it's an issue with the charge. I will reconfirm this in about 2 to 3 minutes. But let's continue nonetheless. So if we guys were talking about, if I have to pay money in a shop to buy something, and I'm just making a digital payment for the same, the shopkeeper is going to be relying on the bank. Yeah, so I will make a transfer. The shopkeeper is going to get a notification on their mobile, and they are going to be relying on the bank, which ends up telling, okay, money has been deducted from Amit's account. It has been credited to the shopkeeper's account, and there's a thumbs up from the shopkeeper side. They let me go with whatever purchase I have made. If we were to not have the bank in between, how would we go about doing it? Any ideas? Like, especially the ones who don't already know how Bitcoin works. Any ideas? How could we go about doing it?
Go to the shop and give it to them.
Yeah, but we want to make a transaction which is definitely scalable as well, can be made digitally as well. Going manually every single time is not a feasible thing. And over here, I think we are talking about exchanging money, but we want to create new kind of, or we want to create an alternative towards having hard physical cash.
Tokens, some form of tokens.
Yes, sure.
Trusted by both parties.
That okay, fine. Or how will I end up having some tokens, and how would the shopkeeper end up, finding value in those tokens?
If they are used widely for transactions.
Sure. Okay, so let's make an assumption there that generally people at large are willing to accept this currency, which we are calling token over here, right? And what after that?
Token could also be backed by something that people already believe in. So like if there's a person who is willing to guarantee that, like something like USDT, like there's a company that's willing to guarantee that we will give you $1, like it's backed by $1. So that's also second alternative.
Sure. So one way is to just look at what is the bank really doing for us, right? So what bank is doing is it has a list of everybody, right, that has their money saved in the bank, and it is maintaining a record of, boss, when is this person making a transfer, to whom is this person making a transfer, when is he depositing, when is he withdrawing, so on and so forth. Is that accurate? Yes, no, maybe?
Yes.
Yeah. Sure. So Suha says distributing the records or ledger. Yeah, totally. So we can try and emulate whatever the bank is already doing, because at the end of the day, what bank is doing is maintaining this record of all the transactions that every individual has been doing. It's of course doing the job of passing this information on to other banks, also doing a reconciliation from time to time, etc. Let us see whether we guys can do it, as a bunch of individuals or not, and what are the problems that we end up facing if we try to do it as individuals. I'm hoping this works, and it does. Okay. All right. So let's say 4 friends, Astha, Bhavna, a name with C. Alice, Bob, Charlie comes very.
Chitra.
Chitra. Okay, all women here. And let's put a guy over there, Deepak, ABCD. Over here. Now, these people, let's say they are going out frequently. Usually, just one person takes the check, and these guys, come back home and settle it with cash. Right now, instead of settling it with cash every single day, what they can also do is, just end up keeping a record of who owes someone else how much. Okay, let's just simplify it with an example. Let's say Astha A owes B 100 rupees. Okay, B owes A 50 rupees. This is the second time that A and B went together. C owes B another 100 rupees, and D owes B another 100 rupees. So at the end of the day, we can totally reconcile this, right? That A is supposed to give 100 rupees. Like A will be giving out 100 rupees. Sorry, this is not correct, because A also is receiving some money, right? So A will effectively give out 100 that he has to give to B, and 50 that he has to get back from B. He eventually has to give out about 50 rupees, right? B, on the other hand, has to give A 50. He has to, receive from A 100, which is 50 incoming, 100 from C, 100 from D also. So it's 250 incoming. Sorry. Clear? C has an outgoing of 100. D has an outgoing of 100. Right? And this is an accurate picture at the end of the day. So A is going to put 50 on the table, right? These guys are going to put 100 rupees each on the table. And this total is going to be equal to 250 rupees, which will be taken by D. Clear so far?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. And this can actually go down to any level, right? It'll always be accurate at the end of the day, right? So these guys can actually make a rule that fine, we're going to just maintain this record, and maybe at the end of the month we'll reconcile, and whoever needs to give back some money, and whoever needs to take money back to them, whoever is overspent will get their money back, whoever has underspent will pay the difference, and it'll get perfectly reconciled. Fine. Now, so blockchain effectively is a protocol. Protocol is like a set of rules. So there are a series of programs that are being run with a set of rules, which ensure that 100% of the time exactly these set of rules will be executed while working on a blockchain transaction, right? While recording a blockchain transaction, or confirming a transaction, so on and so forth. So what we'll also try to do is start writing the protocol or the rules of the protocol by itself, right? So what is rule number 1? It's like, so this place where we are keeping, let's call it the ledger. All right. So the rule number 1 is that A, B, C, D, anybody can write to the ledger. So pardon the handwriting. Clear? What is the other rule? Whatever is that time period after which reconciliation should happen, there'll be a reconciliation. So something like reconcile month end. Works for all of these 4 people. Astha, Bhavna, Chitra, and Deepak. Right? Now, what can what can go wrong with something like this? So when it is between four friends who are living together, obviously, exchanging money with each other, not too much to worry about. But as this group becomes big, right, you don't trust each other as much. Somebody could have a malicious intent. Somebody might have to run away with the money. So many things can go wrong, right? So what can go wrong with the primitive set of rules that we guys have? Anybody can, write to the ledger. What prevents B from writing that A O B 100? So there's like a, the B has just written it and it's kind of fraudulent. Similarly, B ended up writing, C owes $1,000 to B, and so on and so forth, right? This thing needs to be corrected. How can this be possibly corrected? These things should not be allowed to be written in the ledger.
Have it verified with the other party.
Great. And what if the parties, like there's no communication channel available? And the ledger itself, like at the time of writing into the ledger itself, there should be some rule which prevents this from happening.
Maybe like a proof of something to show like proof of it happening. Like, I mean, in the physical sense, it'd be like a bill for the restaurant, for example. So maybe something like attaching something like that to the transaction to say, okay, this is a verified transaction. I didn't make it up.
Sure. And but what is the guarantee that A will also A was the other party along with B when that bill was produced?
Or the other way is increase the counters, something like that, and deduct from that.
Could you elaborate on that, please? You're in the right.
When I do transaction of say 100, something will assign counter 0 and increase by 100, and then at the end of the day, like addition or subtraction, and it can be increased only by that amount, something like that.
Sure. So it could, like that definitely is a part of the protocol, but it solves another problem. All right, and we're going to get to it. So one way in which we can do it is by not letting them, do this credit business. We can say, guys, put all your money up front. The moment you run out of money, you're not allowed to record a transaction anymore, because at the level of the ledger, we can always know who's in positive and who is in zero. We won't let you go to negative anyways. Is that possible? So initially we can, have a rule something like A has deposited 100, B 100, C 100, D 100. And now we start, doing, recording our transaction. So A owes B, A owes B 50. This is fine. A owes C, A owes C 50. This is also fine. But the moment it comes to A owing D another 50, this will get rejected because A has already exhausted, the total 100 that A had deposited. Is this something that we can introduce as a rule?
But this isn't solving the counterparty verification problem, right?
No, it is not solving a problem in the way that, hey, it was, this person was with, B at the restaurant when the bill was produced. But what it is saying is that, guys, only if you have the money can, like the ledger always knows what is the balance that you have. So if you try to add a transaction, which is not mathematically making sense, I'm not going to allow it.
No, but transactions can still be fraudulent, right? For example, the second transaction, A need to give 50 to C. That can be a fraudulent transaction just because it's within the limit of 100 that he submitted initially.
100%. So it can totally happen. And who will be conducting this fraud most likely? A or C?
C.
Definitely. Why? Because C is the one receiving money. So how do we solve this problem? So this is the next set of problem that we fall into. How do we solve it?
So maybe one step is whoso all parties are involved, there can be a verification method from all the parties.
Surely. So so this verification needs to be taken from the person who owes the money, right? So when A owes money, so when B is writing the record that A owes me 50 rupees, right? A will have to sign it, like something, their signature next to that, right? And similarly, when C is adding a record that A owes me 50, A again has to sign it, right? This transaction was never allowed, so let's put it out over here, right? Then so everybody ends up signing the transactions. Make sense? Does this take care of the problem that you just highlighted?
Yes.
Yeah. So now given that this is a digital ledger that we guys are talking about, these are going to be numbers, right? Eventually they're going to be represented as 0 1 0 1 1 0 1 0 0 1 1 whatever, right? One can make a binary copy of the signature, isn't it? And then end up putting it anywhere where the signature is needed. How do you solve this problem?
Hi, I'm sorry for interrupting, but I got disconnected for a bit in between. So I missed the part about that last transaction which you said was never acceptable. I don't know what that was about. Is it possible for you to just repeat that?
Effectively, C was trying to add a fraudulent transaction saying that A owes me 100 rupees. Okay, right? So don't worry about the signatures right now. So this was a transaction that C was trying to add, but the new rules of the system are that only positive balances people are able to transfer. So this thing clearly is a fraud because A has no money left. It has already spent the total 100 rupees that it had with itself. Okay, so this gets rejected because of the new rule that we have provided to the ledger.
Okay, got it. All right.
So then after that, I'm sorry, I don't know, I can't see the chat screen, but somebody else raised the point. But within the limits of the 100 rupees that A had, C can definitely end up adding that, okay, adding one more transaction, say this one. Let me just change it a little bit. So now what if C has an intention that let me get another 40 rupees from A. Okay, so this is less than 100, so 50 plus 10 plus 40, less than equal to 100. It means the ledger will still accept it, but it's definitely fraudulent. Why? Because we are stating so C has maliciously tried to add this record to the ledger. So how do you prevent that from happening? We basically ask A to sign everywhere where A is involved. We ask B to sign everywhere where B is involved, right? So on and so forth, right? So this is the next thing that we guys had discussed, and this will solve that problem. But the next problem is that all these signatures are binary signatures. Effectively, they're just a series of zeros and ones. You can make a binary copy, replace that signature with the sequence of zeros and ones. It'll be exactly identical. How do you solve this problem?
Make sure that every transaction has a unique signature.
Okay.
I think it will be encryption.
It has to be encryption. Okay. So we will have to make use of cryptography over here. So we'll cover cryptography for computer science people and non-computer science people also. Simply put, cryptography provides a way for somebody to provide two details. So instead of it just being a very simple signature over here, there will be two pieces of information that will be shared by the end user, which will ensure that for every single message, it is unique. So what both of you have said is accurate. Every single signature will end up being unique, but it will represent that it'll guarantee that it can only be signed by A, or it can only be signed by B. So let's look into how cryptography works. All right. We'll not go inside the mathematics of cryptography, but very simply, there are two key components of a cryptography. Or if we were talking in computer science terms, there are two functions that are important. So one is the sign function. So it'll have a message. It'll have a private key. Let me call it secret key. And it will produce a signature. The other one is a verify function. Okay, it'll have the message, something called a public key, and the signature, and it will give a result of true or false. All right, so there are two of these things, secret key and private key. All right, two elements, secret key and public key. This secret key is always kept by users. So A is going to keep their secret key, and utilize it to sign a particular message, and then using their private key, and they're gonna add their signature over here. All right, now anybody, and this public key is available to the people at large, so anybody can verify whether it was actually signed by A by using the verify function. So they have access to the message, so this thing is called the message, right? They will pass that message, they will pass the public key, which is available to everybody, they will pass the signature into the verify function, and they will get a true or false result. If it is a true result, it can be proven, guaranteed, that A has actually signed it. And if they get a false result, we know that it's a fraudulent transaction and we can actually cancel it out. Okay, now this thing, how the signature works and how the verification works is reasonably complex and mathematical. We'll not get into that. But what all you non-computer science guys need to know is that if there was even a very small little change, like there's a very big file, right? Or let's say that there's a whole book of Shakespeare's, complete set of Shakespeare's novels, and if only one character gets changed in that, right, this is going to return a false. Okay, so the message has to be exact, right, and only then will you get the signature to be true. So nobody can really tamper with the value of the transaction that has been written over there. Clear so far?
Yes.
Yeah, like non-computer science folks?
Yeah.
Cool. So now we are making some progress, with respect to our ledger. We are creating some new rules. We are letting people sign and, verify their transactions, etc. Now fraud is getting eliminated to a great extent from our system. So what we will see is that this whole ledger that we guys had created, right, it can keep going on and on, right? Forget about reconciliation. We possibly don't need it also, because it will not allow anybody to effectively add things that are not legit, and whatever does exist ends up being perfectly within the bounds of all the rules that have been set between the people over here. So in our protocol, we have anybody can write to it. Then the second rule that we will have will be, the person who owes money needs to sign. Right? And so far, I think this is good enough. We can continue with this, and at any given point in time, we can take a break. Wherever is the reconciliation is exactly the amount of money that is left with A, B, C, D, E, F, G, as many number of people are there in the system. Make sense so far?
Yes.
Yeah. So now for large groups of people, it makes total sense. They can come together, do something like this. But this whole ledger, where is this? Right now we're assuming that, it is in some central place where everybody can end up seeing it, everybody can come and write to it, so on and so forth, isn't it? Most likely it's like a public website where I can log in and just add my transactions and go out of it, etc. Isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. But do you foresee a problem with that? Now the problem is like who hosts that website? Whoever is hosting that website, what if this fellow runs away with the ledger itself? Right? Something else happens. The website got hacked. Things got corrupted. Right? It becomes a problem. Right? It's not a very fault-tolerant system of sorts. Legit problem?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So how do we solve that? One way in which we can go about solving it is by saying that, boss, instead of this ledger, remaining with just one person, and I will never trust just one person to have this whole thing. It'll be as good as me trusting the bank, with keeping a record of my transactions, and we lose the purpose that we are trying to solve here. We're trying to remove any single point of failure or any one party who everybody has to trust, to get their things going. People want to be able to transfer money to each other without relying on any other central party. So one way in which it can happen is if this whole ledger, a copy of it gets shared with all the different users, and we figure out a way that it is always updated and it's always the same between them. So everybody will have the same copy, right? So when I go to a shop and I transfer him some money, so this person, he has got his own copy of the ledger. He waits to see whether it's gotten added over here. Now, given that this ledger is publicly, anybody can add money to it, or anybody can add a transaction to it. What if I had, just added it on, I just transferred it to this guy. I didn't transfer it to all the other people in the network. This guy will also wait for others to confirm whether this transaction is being seen in their ledgers or not. So when all of these guys say yes, 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 it's showing in my transaction, this guy will say, okay, fine, this money has been received by me. Please take your goods and thank you very much for the payment. All right. If I had tried to do some fraud and I had transferred, I had somehow figured out a way of just updating this guy's ledger, but then all of these guys would have said, no, I'm not seeing this transaction in my ledger. I'm not seeing it in my ledger. And then this guy will also reject this whole transaction, and this thing can never really happen. Okay. Fundamentally, is it making sense? How it really happens, we'll come into next. But is it making sense? If we are able to achieve this, we've basically served our purpose.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. But then how do we do that? Because as you know, these guys are now we are just expanding our system. We are making it like a much bigger system. People are not living in the same city, same country, and there are many such users, right? So they are spread across the world, right? It takes time for the ledger to get updated between different people. So imagine it's a complex system like this, and you should expect everything that can go wrong will go wrong. These people are sitting in different countries. It takes time to broadcast these messages, right? So every time there's a new transaction, so they've all got their copies of the ledger. And every time this guy observes a new transaction, adds it over here to the bottom and sends it to all his neighbors. right? This guy found something, then he got another new transaction being added, right? He added it, sends them to his neighbors, so on and so forth, right? So there's constant sending of messages happening between all of these parties, right? Because everybody's ledger has to be updated with the latest set of transactions, and it needs to be the same. Only then can the system work, right? But the way I've explained it right now, this looks like there's no way in hell that everybody can have the same data in their ledger, right? Yes, no?
Yeah.
So let me say that one more time. Imagine this person sitting in India, USA, China, Australia, this thing. We're talking computer networks, right? This person is seeing adding a new transaction, right? This person's adding a new transaction. This person's adding a new transaction. This person's adding a new transaction. Everybody. How the hell is this ledger going to remain the same? Because everybody is not only adding new transactions, they're also adding it and broadcasting it to all of their neighbors that boss have added a new transaction. There's no chance that the ledger can ever be the same in this kind of a system. We will have to figure out a way in which we can keep the ledger consistent across all of these entities. Right or wrong?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes.
How do we do that now? And this is, at the heart of, how blockchains work.
There has to be a sequence.
I have a question.
Node.
Yes, please.
So why is there no way in hell that all the ledgers could be consistent with each other? If there is a code assigned to that transaction, and if it is being sent, if the same code is being sent to everyone, then we can be sure that it's the same transaction, right?
100%, but the sequence of transactions will be different, right?
Right, the sequence will be different.
And then the ledgers can't be the same.
Okay, got it.
Eventually, all the messages will reach everybody, but the sequence will be totally messed up.
Got it. Okay.
And then if it is not 100% identical, then it's a problem, right? Because then there are totally different computations happening.
Got it.
Then it can be add a timestamp to all these transactions, because the timestamp will be the same for everyone.
Yes.
Irrespective of the order.
Yeah, and this is like one thing which has been effectively captured by Solana protocol, and they call it proof of history. It's not exactly a timestamp, but they've done a pretty interesting way in which they have been able to, give a proper sequence to all the transactions. But a timestamp ends up becoming a challenge because chances are that two transactions have happened exactly at the same timestamp.
But it can't be on the microsecond level.
Yeah, but
will that happen?
No?
Okay.
So we could do it, as per the exact timestamp of the quartz crystal created by the, the international time standard, whatever that is, right? But the network delay that it takes to, ping that and come back, that is enough time for you to, miss out on a transaction being added or not be able to differentiate two parallel transactions.
Oh, got it. Yeah, I skipped that part.
Sure. Right. So this is where, the most interesting piece, which effectively ended up solving the double spend problem, came into being, keeping the ledger consistent. So we created a new rule that only the person who's done the maximum amount of work, will be able to add new transactions to the network. Okay. So we give everybody some problem to solve. Everybody in the network, some problem to solve. Whichever is the person that ends up solving the problem first, right? And effectively has, completed that work, whatever his transactions are, they will, so these are multiple transactions, they will get added to the ledger. Okay. Now this thing is how this person gets selected, or in reality, these are called nodes. How they get selected is at the heart of how Bitcoin actually ends up working. All right, we will get over to that. So in a recap, if only one person is allowed to add at a particular point in time, then this person will say, okay, I have added my transactions and here is the proof that I have actually done the work, and given that everybody is able to verify that proof, they will just drop whatever transactions they have and they will assimilate and they will just append this the set of transactions that were added by the person who gave the proof of work into their own ledgers also. The programs in the Bitcoin software will end up doing it. Okay, now how does it work? So far so good, clear?
Yes.
Yeah. So that way only one person at any given point in time will be able to solve and broadcast to the entire team. These are the next set of transactions that you in this particular sequence that you need to add to your ledger. Is it possible that two of these people solve the puzzle at the same time and ended up broadcasting that, boss, my proof of work got completed, so you take it, so you add my transactions? Totally possible. But then we will see how we solve that problem also. So let me quickly get into how proof of work.
I just have a point to say here. So here what you're basically doing is that instead of the broadcast happening at different times, what you're saying is that only one person will do it. So you're basically, in some way, isn't that putting power in one person's hands?
But it is a randomly selected person in the entire network.
Okay.
Yeah, so everybody gets to solve the same puzzle, but the puzzle is a mathematical problem, and it is designed in such a way that everybody has an equal probability of being able to solve it. Whoever ends up solving it first, gets to add the next block. Now let's get into exactly what is going on behind the scenes, right? So these are the three people. Now they have their own different copies of the ledger, right? So in this transaction, B has transferred to C, C has transferred to D, D has transferred to E. In this one, B has transferred to C. So till here we can assume, let's just assume that before this point, everybody is on the same page, right? B has transferred to C, A has transferred to D, D has transferred to A, right? Over here, D has transferred to E, F has transferred to C, A has transferred to D. All right, totally different pieces. What we make use of right now, is called a cryptographic hash function. Have you ever heard of SHA-256? So, in your browser, when you see the green secured SSL or secured HTTPS URL, right? Behind the scenes, what it's using is SHA-256. We'll just probably demo some of these things also. The puzzle effectively is when we create a SHA-256 hash of, this particular series of transactions, okay? So this is, let's call these things, so let's call it block 1. This let's call them A, B, and C. This is block A1, block B1, block C1. Okay. Yeah. So what a cryptographic hash function does, it essentially breaks down, like we had said, right, earlier also when I mentioned, if anything changes, the signature is going to be different. A cryptographic hash function gives a very specific 256-bit number, which essentially is like a 256 sequence of zeros and ones, which uniquely represent this particular state, these whatever is the text over here, right? Anything changes, this number is going to be totally different. So it could change, and imagine that this goes on like 256 times, right? If you change something little bit also, like you changed it earlier it was 100 rupees, you made it 101 rupees also. It might be something like 11110010112. So on and so forth, 111. So these effectively what it is that I'm sorry, when I'm trying to use non-computer science lingo, it just gets a little challenging. But similarly, this guy will also have its own SHA-256 hash, which will be another sequence of 110s, etc. Totally different, totally unique. And this 256 is a very, very, very big number. All right. So 2 to the power 256 is insanely big number. It's not even, we can't compare it to number of atoms in the galaxy, atoms in the universe, and so on. It's like much more than that. So definitely there is nothing that can, a possibility that somebody can randomly guess, come up with a correct interpretation or be able to reverse engineer the text from having just this end of the hash by itself. I'm sorry, I think I'm not being very, very clear right now, but I'll make up for it in just a moment. Are you with me or am I losing you over here? Everybody will basically be making a hash of this number. They will get a long sequence of 256 zeros and ones, and then on top of it, they will have to solve a problem. Okay, whoever solves this problem first actually gets to add the next block. Essentially, this is the block. This block will effectively get added on to everybody else in the network. This will be the thing that's broadcasted. So this is the intention. Is the 256 zeros and ones thing clear?
Yep.
Yeah. So what is this puzzle? This puzzle essentially is what number can I append to this? Like it can be any number, any digit, 1, 2, 7, 6, 5, 0, 8, 2, something like this. What kind of number can I append to this whole block, right? Such that the first, say, 30 characters of these 256, and when I take a SHA-256 of these two, that the first 30, for now, let's just say for the first 30 of these digits are zeros. As simple as that. Okay. Now, why did I say 30? It's an arbitrary number. It's not exactly how it is decided. But probability of getting adding a random number, which has when you add to it and you take a SHA-256, you will end up getting 30 zeros non-stop, is like 1 by 2 to the power of 30, which is like maybe 1 in a billion. Okay, chances of you doing it. The only way you can end up finding out this number is if you do 1, 2, then you calculate a SHA-256, then you do 2, then you calculate a SHA-256, then you do 3, then you do 4, so on and so forth. Okay, and then eventually you will find a number. When you append it along with the previous set of transactions, the resultant SHA-256 is actually giving so many zeros in between, in the beginning, and then you have effectively solved the problem.
I have a question.
Go ahead, please.
These blocks that you've put out there, that is one block at a. It's basically representing a snapshot of the ledger that everyone has, right?
A snapshot of the ledger that this particular person has.
So each person has a different set.
Correct. Correct.
And if they are synced to that point, would these be the same?
So what we are saying is that till this point, everybody's blockchain is the same. Let's just assume that. All right.
Okay.
Let's just assume that everybody is the same. These are the new set of transactions that these guys have, each of these guys, A, B, and C, have gotten.
Right.
And now these are all very different from each other. Either the sequence is different or the transactions altogether are different. Right.
Right.
To keep the blockchain consistent for everybody.
So, okay. So you've got the problem in to ensure that they get updated in one order so that the sequence then remains the same by the end of it.
So what I'm saying is that only one of them will be able to add these transactions, and everybody will have to accept these transactions only as the next,
Correct. Right. Got it.
appended onto their thing. And the way they get to do it is by discovering a number which can only be done if you go sequentially and solve these computations a gazillion times. Essentially the way this whole number is derived is that within 10 minutes, as many number of zeros are required such that it can be reliably solved. This puzzle can be reliably solved within 10 minutes. So that is the way we calculate the number of zeros, in Bitcoin.
Okay.
So everybody, each of these people, the moment they and by the way, these
Question here. For all of this, won't they receive a same set of problem? Say like for A, B, and C, at one point of time, we see they have the same set of ledger. Then each of them has received 3 different problems to solve. And whosoever solves it first will be a winner for each of the transaction.
Yeah. So my bad for not being clear enough. The problem is same for everybody. It's always the same. The problem is find a number X, which when added to your set of transactions ends up creating a SHA-256, which has X number of zeros in the beginning. Okay. These X number of zeros, let's say there are 60 zeros. That is the problem. Out of 256 zeros and ones, that should be the answer of the SHA-256 algorithm. When applied on a combination of this plus this, you should have so many zeros in the beginning. Clear? This is the only problem that everybody has to solve. But to get to this X, there's no other way to get this X other than manually doing it from 1 to or from wherever. But you have to get really lucky and try this like millions of times to be able to do it. Got it?
So in that case, every node, they have a same algorithm to solve it, or they can have different algorithms to solve this
every
problem.
node has exactly the same algorithm, and that is why it's called the protocol also. Everybody follows it, right? So so now so how does everybody end up appending it on their chain? They will. So this person found the X supposedly, yeah, and they whatever is the SHA-256, right? So that result right, just extrapolate it to as many zeros that are needed, right? This whole thing they will put as they will submit it along with sorry, I'll remove it to eliminate confusion. They will essentially broadcast a message to everybody. These are the set of transactions. These are the set of transactions. This is my result. This is my this is my final answer, and this person is actually given the ability to pay themselves a little bit of money, right? Saying that A gets at the end of it, actually A receives 10 Bitcoin, suppose something like that. Okay, because he has done the work and is helping grow the ledger. So this is an exception that is made, right? And this is how people get rewarded for doing all this hard work, effectively called mining. I'll elaborate on this again a little bit more. Are you getting it so far? A solved it first. A gets the right to add one more transaction at the end, saying that I have to receive 10 Bitcoin, and ends up broadcasting it to all of their neighbors. Okay, the neighbors are going to check, boss, did the person actually solve the puzzle by checking out this proof? If yes, they will totally automatically they will reject whatever transactions those guys are processing. They will collect A's block and add it to their ledger at the end of it. Clear?
I have a question.
Yes, please.
Is it possible? So how do A, B, and C get the communication of a transaction? Is it possible that the communication came only to B and not to A?
Totally possible.
So then, would that transaction get lost? Or does the transaction have to be communicated to everyone? That's the rule. That's sorry, I think.
Yeah. So
that's what it is, right?
So the job of the algorithm is to ensure that all pending messages keep getting added to the node that is nearest to you. So all of these guys that were distributed around the world, right? They're all running the same piece of software, right? They are all capable of adding transactions. They will all be running the same piece of software, and that software will ensure that no transaction gets lost at all at any given point in time.
Right. So ideally, everyone should have received all notification. If the a transaction has not been communicated to all of them, it's not added to the ledger at all, right?
Not just necessary to all of them, but let's just say there are. So by the way, so when we said these transactions, right? So in reality, in Bitcoin, 2,400 transactions are put together in one block. Okay. And let's say that, there are another 500 transactions more that are left floating around, so A decided to pick the first 2,400 that came to them. What happens to these remaining 500? Is this similar to the kind of question that you asked right now?
Yes, in some way. Also, I wanted to ask is that, does everyone have record, even if they might be in different order? It is necessary that all of the nodes have record of those transactions, right? Basically, the problem solving task is solving for the sequence of the transactions, but not the record of the transaction as such. Am I right?
Not just that, the problem solving task is a task that you need to accomplish. It's a very random task, a purposeless task that you have to accomplish. But if you're lucky enough to have accomplished that task, whatever transactions you have is what everybody will add. Now, everybody who's trying to solve the puzzle, they are doing it for the reward that they'll be getting. They'll get to add that Bitcoin to their own wallet, right? Like against their own name. Everybody wants to solve these puzzles for the same reason, and whoever is able to solve it fast, everybody else solve it first. Everybody else has to accept that person's transactions as the next block. That gets handled. Okay. Now, what next question is, if everybody is adding 2,400 transactions, right? But if there are more transactions in the network, what happens to the remaining transactions that possibly didn't get added? So the thing is that they keep getting queued, and eventually this queue will, get exhausted, and there will be zero transactions left, because 2,400 transactions are going out every 10 minutes, and from this queue, so long as we have fewer than 2,400 being added to it, eventually it will come down to zero. If you have more than 2,400 being added very rapidly, there are like different ways by which Bitcoin has gone ahead and solved these problems. But I think this whole mathematical side of how the blockchain works ended up taking a lot of time. I'll just quickly jump on to the last piece of it so that we can come back to the applications also of Bitcoin. Shall we proceed?
Yes.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, what we will do is a hash of the previous block, which got created after solving the problem. It'll get appended to the next block, right? And the hash that gets calculated for this block will get appended to the next block, right? And so on and so forth. Now, if anybody wants to alter the state of the blockchain, which means that they want to change some transaction over here, right? If they did do so, this will become a very, very the hash that got created over here gets invalidated, because even if one digit gets changed over here, this number will not be possible. Because the only thing that and if this is not correct, then this one will get invalidated. Then this will be over here. This will get invalidated. Essentially, the entire blockchain will not end up working, because at the time of adding, what we always track is whether or not whatever this person is saying, am I able to achieve it from the previous block that is available with me in the ledger. So let's say this is guy D. D had so he's being told, okay, add this particular block, right? And what D will do is, whatever was the previous block that was available with D, he will run this result that was a part of the block that was broadcasted over to him with the message. He will add that, do a SHA-256, compare that, okay, this is indeed the result, right? And if it is indeed the result, only then it will end up taking it. This result will never end up matching if even one transaction in this entire chain was invalidated or incorrect, right? So this is a way, this is how blockchains achieve immutability. Like once it's been recorded, it cannot really get changed. Anybody trying to change this will really have to add the next set of blocks very quickly. Let me demonstrate that also how. Let's say A, we call this person A, B, C, D. Now, so let's say A has a nefarious intention. Okay, A says that, I'm adding a transaction that A transferred 100 to B. Okay, and I'm broadcasting it, and I have added it to my particular block, and I've said that everything is perfect. Let's move forward now, and let's say this is the previous state of the blockchain where everybody is in sync. Okay, so A added one fraudulent transaction into a whole set of blocks, sent it over to the blockchain to get added. Now B and C will, B, C, D, all of these people will also get this whole thing broadcasted. Like we will also take a scenario where if A figures out a way not to broadcast it, right? It'll get broadcasted to each one of these. But when they match with the previous state that was there with all of them, they will not be able to get the exact hash which actually matches, because of this extra detail that A had added over there. So they will end up rejecting A's claims then and there itself. So A will not be able to insert it in the first place, right? Since we have this diagram, let's also try to think about that scenario wherein, wherein we have multiple people who end up creating new blocks at the same time in parallel. Okay, so this guy A said, okay, I've added my block, everything is perfect with it, here it goes. D said, okay, I've also added my block, everything's perfect with it. They're both exactly at the same timestamp, right? Then chances are that A again got lucky, added one more block, right, and broadcasted it off to everybody. And over here, C ended up adding one more block. Now if anybody has to add a new fraudulent transaction, even one single fraudulent transaction, they will really have to keep adding more and more, keep successfully adding more and more blocks that are all legal and valid, which everybody else can take. But over here, B can add a block, C can add a block, D can add a block. Eventually this chain will end up becoming bigger than A's chain, right? Because unless A has more than 50% of the computational power of the entire network, it can never compete with the rest of the network itself, right? And the program of the blockchain is such that whenever there are two competing blocks being added, you end up accepting the highest chain, and this is what the network kind of adapts as the final source of truth. So the timestamp issue that we were discussing it gets taken care of this way. Even frauds that are possibly being done get taken care of this way. And this is also like the 51% attack that we hear about in Bitcoin talk sometimes. All right, so this is like more or less how Bitcoin actually ends up working. It becomes an immutable because it cannot change, append only, because new transactions can only be added at the end, distributed ledger, because the same ledger is distributed across everybody, which acts as the source of truth about all transactions in the Bitcoin network. So this was like possibly not very great explanation. I'm not proud of myself the way this went, but bear with me. I'm sorry, but let's move forward with the rest of the talk. So we've just covered some of these aspects. Now, so blockchain essentially becomes a combination of all the stuff that I just explained. The block, the ledger, the distribution, the software and the programs and the rules that are there, that broadcasts and ensures that everybody runs the same set of software, the transactions and how they are computed, the confirmation, finalization of the transaction, the proof of work on who gets to add it, and the final result. So this whole piece together is effectively called, blockchain. So blockchain is just not one part of what we talked. The entire software, the protocol itself together comprise of blockchain, and ledger is just one part of it. Yeah. So quick history and evolution of blockchain. David Chaum is a legendary cryptographer, who pioneered the work about digital currencies. This is in the late 1980s. And the work that they did was so pioneering that the National Security Agency of USA stopped, they actually prohibited cryptographers publicly talking about their work, even publishing their work in research journals. So one of the people who used to work, under David Chaum was called Nick Szabo. And Nick Szabo is credited, like he's one of the people many people think is actually the real Satoshi Nakamoto. And he came ahead and created something called, BitGold, which is very close to Bitcoin, but they had not solved the double spend problem very, very well. Until eventually in 2008, via the use of blockchain, this problem was effectively solved. Besides BitGold, there was also, some other kinds of schemes available, like Vadai had created a protocol or a white paper on something called Bcoin, which was very similar to Bitcoin, but we had just some very small things missing. And all of these guys are considered, the people, the giants on top of whose shoulders Bitcoin eventually ended up emerging. Now, quickly jumping on to different applications of blockchain. So cross-border payments is something that we've all heard of. Generally speaking, the larger the amount, the more money Visa or SWIFT ends up taking. It also ends up taking 2 to 3 days because it happens via a network of banks. So money has to switch multiple hands, go through different kind of regimes. But when it comes to something like Bitcoin, it's an instantaneous peer-to-peer transfer. Within 10 minutes, you can transfer money anywhere. And it'll cost like a fraction of what, especially for very large transfers, it'll cost a fraction of what conventional monetary systems would allow you to do. Supply chain management. Now, in very large supply chains, there are so many different distributors. who are, just a part of the overall machinery. So they are supplying a very small part, and they do not know the big picture, but they also don't know all the other, vendors that are providing other details. They don't know, they just don't have the whole truth. So to give everybody exactly the same idea of where the system stands, brings in a lot of transparency and efficiency into traditional supply chains. Now, contracts also, they could possibly have a lot of loose ends. When we talk about smart contracts, and it'll get covered. So smart contracts are a completely foolproof way. Whatever is the code is the law, and this code can be audited by any other party, and they're able to do and exactly whatever is written in the code is effectively what will get executed. So vulnerable identity management and theft. This is a big deal, because if somebody gets control of your identity, then they can commit all kinds of frauds in your name, and you'll not even be able to protect yourself against these things if you are relatively, not savvy about it, and you could get wrongly framed, incriminated for the same reasons. Now, blockchain is an extremely transparent platform, because even these identities are created, from scratch. They're recorded in the public domain, and everything that has been done out of that identity is also tracked. So you're always able to, go back to the original truth, rather than and nobody will be able to. And if somebody has tried to manipulate things, the blockchain would not just allow such a thing to happen, and it can always be traced back to every malicious attempt with what identity which user was able to do it. Now, it's not necessary for the users to reveal who they are, but KYC, etc., have been implemented so that real identities of users are also known. Healthcare organizations, very similar stuff. Transparency is a big deal over here. Digital copyright and privacy management. This is a very good use case for smart contracts, which we'll possibly get to later. Slow government systems, public sectors, efficiency is one of the good things, because it's completely done via software, and a lot of things can be customized, which can, even the 10-minute block time that we have created for blockchains can actually be reduced significantly. So corruption gets eliminated because everything is straightforward, transparent, etc., etc. So there are several use cases that we will cover in detail. Today was more about talking about blockchain and Bitcoin more specifically and how it works. I hope that for some of you it was useful, and I'm happy to take any questions for those of you that are stuck around till the end. Any questions, anybody?
So one question: how is Bitcoin different from blockchain? Like, is there any difference between blockchain and Bitcoin?
So blockchain is the sum total of all the things that we were discussing in the protocol. So the ledger, the software that broadcasts the information, the software that calculates and does the mathematical validation, all the cryptography code, all of that. So these all things put together, a single unit is called a blockchain, right? Bitcoin is one application of blockchain with particular configurations, particular set of rules, so that's essentially it. Now, there was a point in time where Bitcoin and blockchain were not differentiated from one another, right? That is at the time that it was launched. It was digital money, or digital store of value, digital gold of sorts. But since then, so many people have taken Bitcoin's code, changed these things a little bit, like changed the puzzle in a way that just in 3 minutes or 2.5 minutes block can happen. That is a Litecoin. Others have configured it in such a way that it can handle many more transactions and have very high throughput. So all of these have become variations of Bitcoin. And then a lot of improvisations have happened, or innovations have happened on top of the original Bitcoin code itself. Like Ethereum was built by Vitalik Buterin along with 7 other people. And all of these guys are original contributors to the Bitcoin source, like the actual Bitcoin code. So Charles Hoskinson, who went ahead to found Cardano, Gavin Wood, who went ahead to found Polkadot, I think Rubin, who went ahead to create Consensus, which is like the Infosys of the blockchain world, right? All of these guys were co-founders of Ethereum. We only know Vitalik, but all these guys came together, brought fundamental innovations on the Bitcoin code, and it led to newer blockchains emerging from there. Yeah, we can totally call them the Ethereum mafia.
Hey Amit, Brudul here. So I have a question. So in recent times, we've been hearing a lot that blockchain or Bitcoin is getting centralized. Okay, reason being, the whole idea of the puzzle that is being solved is getting difficult. Right now, people or the miners who've already solved those things and they've been incentivized via Bitcoin, these guys are only able to like solve these puzzles because they have a lot of money and they can set up mining farms and stuff, right? Now these guys have a lot of power now, and it's why, and that is some of one of the reasons why it's also getting centralized in a sense that mining is very centralized, right? So do you think there's a problem here, or I mean, just want to know your thoughts on this.
In fact, centralization has two totally different reasons. One of course is mining. Now earlier Bitcoin, because the puzzle was simpler, so the code is written in such a way that as the number of nodes in the network keep increasing and more number of people are solving the puzzle, suppose there are millions of people who are solving the puzzle, then just a billion iterations could happen much faster than 10 minutes, right? So the puzzle ends up keeps getting automatically tougher and tougher. But some people, so Chinese, they started building special machines that are focused only on doing SHA-56 calculation, 256 calculations. Taka, 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 taka. So these guys will be able to do these calculations way faster than what other people are able to do with their machines. So they started winning the game, right? And then whoever had the best machines, they were winning and they were getting maximum mining rewards. So this led to some amount of centralization. Then other people said, what is this? We won't allow the big boys to win all the game. We will pool resources together. So the small boys came together and they said that, okay, we will create one massive computational pool, which 10,000 of us will put all of our money together to buy a lot of machinery so that we can compete with these guys. And whenever we win a block reward, it'll get split between all 10,000 of us. Right. So they started having their chances, their chances of getting some Bitcoin as block rewards as well. So these things were called mining pools. But definitely some level of centralization did start happening over here. Another aspect in which centralization happens is via the Lightning Network, which has more recently gotten introduced. So in the original Bitcoin gang, there were two groups which were more or less at war with each other. So one group was of the opinion that Bitcoin originally had 1 MB block size, which could typically end up recording 2,400 transactions. In fact, some of the information that I've given today could be factually incorrect also, right? Then there was another, and these guys were of the opinion that there'll be fewer transactions. People are not going to be adding a lot of transactions very frequently because it is like digital gold, right? So people will just want to keep preserving it. We won't need very high throughput. Another gang wanted to have like very high set of transactions. So they wanted to increase the block size. For very high transactions, these guys wanted to stick to the original vision of Satoshi Nakamoto, where it will be like a medium of cash, very low transaction fees, and very high number of transactions that are happening across the network. Now, between the two of these groups, there was always a tussle. So a bunch of things happened. Bitcoin Cash got created because of this tussle. Craig Wright ended up creating something called Bitcoin SV also to stick to the real vision and very low transaction fee, very high, in fact, and not a fixed amount of block size also. But these things happened off. But a way in which centralization saw its root was that a lot of third parties decided that instead of finalizing all the transactions directly on the Bitcoin chain itself, let me process a big chunk myself, and then if you send them up to Bitcoin main chain for a kind of for eventually getting recorded. But at my level, at my local level, let me consolidate a lot of these transactions. Now this is very good because a lot of this finalization started happening much faster. But the entity, which was that local entity, started getting a much significant benefit out of being the person who's accumulating the transaction. So one of the people who are rumored to be Satoshi Nakamoto, he's called Adam Black. He started a company called Blockscreen somewhere in 2014, 2015, exactly to do this. So and who are the people who started doing this? The big banks again, right? Because no financial system they want to leave alone, and in a way it got slightly centralized. But again, the actual Lightning Network upgrade, the way things are, it continues to be significantly decentralized. Answers your question?
Thank you. Yeah, sure. Thank you.
Cool. Any other questions, guys?
So I have a small question, and it's again around quantitative easing. The thing is that so I also realized it just now on your call, right? Like, although I'm a big Bitcoin supporter, that it's not possible to do quantitative easing in Bitcoin. So in future, if a government wants to expand exponentially, right, QE make sense, to be honest, because if you really could generate assets that could justify the debt that you're creating, that made sense. So under a Bitcoin economy, then you won't be able to get that exponential growth, because the only way you can borrow money is through the system itself. So how do you think that would play out in future?
See, printing more money is a good way of settling debt. Printing good money is not a good way of introducing productivity in the economy, right? More money via quantitative easing will effectively not increase the amount of goods and services that are being created in that economy, right? Effectively, everything just gets more expensive. Because sum total of that goods and service is the same. So the currency actually gets devalued.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. But if, let's say, I'm a government, right, and I think that if we can make more bridges and roads, we would be able to generate more goods and services in future.
No, so what I'm saying is that the only thing that this money can be utilized for is settling the debt. The moment you start trying to build bridges and roads with this kind of money, the guys will say that, boss, pay me more, because effectively so much more money has been introduced into the system. Why everything has gotten expensive around me, so I also want more for my bridges, to build these bridges.
It would depend, right? Like how you would push that money into the economy. Like if you just use it for that particular bridge only, I don't think that it will cause inflation.
So you print more money. You say that this money will be utilized primarily to build a bridge. Can be considered, yeah, because there's not sufficient time for it to get trickled down to the rest of it. But again, it'll have to impact the large public per se, because printing money can only happen via central banks. Central banks don't directly distribute money to the people at large, right? So they will give the new notes to the government. In lieu of government bonds, government has to pay interest on these bonds that they have, which the central bank has taken from them, and then the government chooses to deploy this entire thing into building this particular bridge. I think all this interest that they end up paying to the bank will have to come from taxpayers' money or from the revenue that the bridge ends up generating, which possibly will take a while. But I get your point about possibly even I would love to study it a little better. Has Japan really benefited from this non-stop quantitative easing for the last 40 odd years? Maybe now more than 40 odd years.